Justice. Yeah. Justice. Know your rights. Justice. Justice. Know your rights. Know your powers. Smart talk. Real facts. This is your hour.
Welcome to a new episode of Justice. I'm your host, Attorney at Law Janice St. Romain, and this is the show where we talk about knowing your rights and knowing your power. Tonight, we'll be discussing the Antigua and Barbuda Electoral Commission, its role and functions, and the Representation of the People Act, Cap 379, as amended, which is the principal law that governs registration, nominations, polling, and the overall conduct of elections here in Antigua and Barbuda. This episode is about understanding the legal framework that governs elections, understanding your rights and responsibilities as a voter, and helping you as viewers better understand the institutions that are responsible for the electoral process here in Antigua and Barbuda. I'm not alone. This evening, I'm joined in studio by His Excellency Ambassador Arthur Thomas, Chairman of the Antigua and Barbuda Electoral Commission, as well as Mr. Ian Hughes, Supervisor of Elections. Ambassador Thomas is a lawyer by profession and a founding partner of the Thomas, John and West law firm. He has a master's in international taxation from Regent University, Virginia, a legal education certificate from the Norman Manley Law School in Kingston, Jamaica, and a Bachelor of Laws from the University of the West Indies. His areas of expertise include civil litigation, corporate consultancy, land law, intellectual property, banking and securities law, insurance, and industrial law and probate. In addition to his legal practice, Ambassador Thomas is the Managing Director of Corporate and Trust Services Caribbean Limited, and he is Antigua and Barbuda's non-resident ambassador to the Czech Republic. Thank you for joining us this evening, Ambassador. Mr. Ian Hughes is a seasoned election practitioner with extensive experience in electoral management and administration in Antigua and Barbuda, as well as across the wider Caribbean. He served as chair of election observer missions across the Caribbean and as a member of a number of observer sessions in other Commonwealth countries and in Central America. Across the course of his career, Mr. Hughes has played a pivotal role in the management of several electoral events nationally, including the general elections of 2004, 2009, 2014, 2018, and 2023, as well as the 2019 referendum on the Caribbean Court of Justice. And he has assisted in the administration of local council government elections in Barbuda, which are held biennially. Thank you both so much for joining us this evening, and welcome to Justice.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you so much. Good evening.
Now, for those of you who are watching, the Representation of the People Act is available at laws.gov.ag, the original act as well as the amended version, if you wish to follow along on our discussion this evening. Before we begin, I also want to make one distinction very clear, because this is a matter that sometimes causes confusion. The Antigua and Barbuda Electoral Commission is a non-partisan body. It's responsible for administering elections in Antigua and Barbuda, but it's not established by the Constitution. It's established by statute under the Representation of the People Act, which I would have mentioned earlier. By contrast, constituency boundaries are dealt with by a separate body. So that is the Constituencies Boundary Commission, which is constitutionally established. So tonight, our focus is going to be on the Electoral Commission, which is governed by a statutory framework. And first off, I'd like to start with you, Ambassador Thomas. For many members of the public, the Electoral Commission is spoken about, but it's not often understood in terms of your role and your function. Perhaps you can share a bit with us. How is it structured? What exactly is the mandate of ABEC, as it's called, under our law?
Thank you. And good evening, everyone. As a preface, the Antigua and Barbuda Electoral Commission is established, as you just said rightly, by statute, the Representation of the People's Act. The first Cap 379, which was subsequently amended in 2001, which first established the commission as a 5-member commission. Subsequently, in 2011, it was again amended to increase that representation on the commission to 7 persons. And of course, the commission is entrusted with the responsibility of the conduct of elections in Antigua and Barbuda. And this is just as a background information. The commission, as I said, comprised 7 persons, and they're drawn from diverse groups, in a sense, in that the chairman is appointed by the Prime Minister in consultation with the leader opposition. The deputy chairman is appointed by the leader of the opposition in consultation with the Prime Minister. Then there are 2 members appointed by the Prime Minister himself, 1 member appointed by the leader of the opposition. Then these ways the civil society comes into play. The 6th member is appointed by jointly by the Antigua and Barbuda Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the unions. And then the 7th is appointed by the Anti-Christian Council, jointly, Anti-Christian Council, and the United Evangelical Association of Antigua and Barbuda. So I think based on the cross-section of representation, it does allow, or the Act is designed to do a number of things. And certainly it is designed to be, firstly, independent. And so Section 6.4 of the Representation of Peoples Act, number 12 of 2011, does speak to that, in that it is clear that the Commission ought not to be subject to the direction or control of any person or entity. And so we stand apart and away from the government, so to speak. Now, functionally, the Commission should act in a consistent manner, in that it ought to bring the features of good electoral management into play. It ought to be fair and impartial, lawful, transparent, and efficient. And all these elements are drawn from Section 1 of the Representation of People Act, number 17 of 2001. So essentially, the Commission is the policy-making arm under the Act, and its duties are set out by way of Sections 6, 1, 2, and 3 of ROPA number 17 of 2001, and it deals with the preparation of voters' register, conduct of elections, selection and appointment of electoral officers, including returning officers and presiding officers, etc. So the important thing to learn about the Act is that it does set out in great specifics all of the details relating to the establishment and conduct of the election in Antigua and Barbuda. And by that measure, it also sets out the function and role of the supervisor of elections. And his functions are primarily on the operational side. He is, in fact, he's the chief operations officer under Section 9 of the Act. He's the chief registration officer, and he's the chief elections officer. So he does wear many hats. And as you quietly mentioned earlier, he's also a creature of the Constitution. So whereas the Electoral Commission may not enjoy those protections, right, he has his role is entrenched by the provision, provisions of the Constitution. So in a nutshell, that's how the Electoral Commission is structured.
Thank you for that. And as you mentioned, ABEC works very closely with the Supervisor of Elections,
Right.
carrying out those practical and legal requirements of the Act that you would have mentioned. So, Mr. Hughes, we're coming to you. As Supervisor of Elections, you play a very hands-on role in the running of the process.
Right.
So while the Commission, as you mentioned, Ambassador, provides sort of the policy and the oversight, Mr. Hughes, your role as Supervisor of Elections is what's at the operational level. So can you explain to the people what exactly is your role? What does
Right.
it cover? How does it fit into that broader framework of the Commission?
Right.
And what does that day-to-day look like?
Right. And so, as the chairman would have mentioned, as CEO of the Electoral Commission, in terms of policies of the Commission, someone needs to ensure that that gets done. So, and that, of course, is the Supervisor of Elections. As the CEO of the organization, my job is to ensure that those policies by the Commission, that they are carried out and that they're implemented. As the Chief Registration Officer, I think it's important for us to know that there are 17 constituencies within the state of Antigua and Barbuda. And yes, as the Chief Registration Officer, I cannot be in all 17 constituencies, and therefore there need to be other individuals working within the constituencies to ensure that electors who meet the eligibility criteria, that they are registered according to the law. And so there are 17 registration officers who are also supported by staff within their various units, a clerk, and also within the registration units are scrutineers. According to law, the scrutineers are appointed based on the representation in Parliament. So in this case, Parliament, the component is the ABLP, the UPP, and in Barbuda, the BPM. So there are representatives on behalf of the ABLP in Parliament, the UPP, at the registration unit, and the UPP at the registration unit, and the BPM in Barbuda. When the Honorable Asset Michael, when he had won his seat, the law also provided for an independent candidate to have a scrutineer within that particular constituency where they are the representative. So as the Chief Registration Officer, I still have oversight of the registration officers within the various constituencies to ensure that they are registering eligible or qualified electors to be part of the process. With that said, the important thing to understand is that you must be registered before you can vote. And therefore, ensuring that they meet that criteria in order to be part of the register, thus allows my other hat, so to speak, as the Chief Elections Officer to function more efficiently, especially at this time going into an election. And so what this involves is another set of, or another group of individuals called returning officers who now manage the elections process within the constituency, and they are supported by a much larger cadre of election day workers or staff complement. In some constituencies, based on the number of polling stations, you may have in excess of 60 to 65 temporary support staff to ensure that the management, the efficient management of the elections take place within the constituency. So 3 hats, so to speak, but all working together to ensure that the Commission continues to function and deliver on its mandate regarding free, fair, transparent elections in Antigua Barbuda. Of course, there is another side, though, that I did not mention, and it is the administrative side. As a public officer, I'm still responsible for the overall day-to-day management of the office, so the accounting department, to ensure that the personnel are remunerated to ensure that all of their paperwork is done correctly and in a timely manner to ensure that they get paid. Deductions are taken out, and also that the bills are paid through the various invoices that we receive, and that all of the processes regarding the Financial Accounting Act of the government, that they are seen to be done. And of course, in terms of training, overall training of staff, we do have an HR department, HR also responsible for training, and I would have served in that department for about 7 years. And so that also involves ensuring that the personnel that we bring on board, that they are sufficiently qualified and are able to carry out their duties in terms of the legislation. And of course, to ensure that other areas of professionalism is maintained, proper customer service, proper business etiquette, and so on. All of these areas to ensure that the Commission continues to deliver on its mandate.
Well, thank you for that breakdown. I think that was very comprehensive. I want to piggyback a bit on something that you would have both mentioned, actually. You would have both mentioned transparency in elections, the importance of fair, free elections as this overarching goal. So for the viewers who are watching, I'd like to ask both of you, what are the key markers of that sort of free, fair, and lawful electoral process? Both of you have extensive experience in observing elections in other countries. You would have both mentioned this. So what are the elements of a free and fair election?
Right.
Okay.
Want to go?
All right, I'll take a crack.
Okay.
Both of you, either
So,
one.
yeah, and you did mention the fact that certainly Mr. Hughes has been involved in a lot of exchanges in terms of observing elections, and at the Commission, our commissioners have been exposed to a lot of training internationally, particularly in the Caribbean, Central and South America, because that's our zone. But we've gone further afield in recent times as far as India, the world's largest democracy. So from these exchanges, we understand what a system, a fair electoral system looks like, what it feels like. We can appreciate instinctively when things are off with the electoral system, if I could put it that way. But in terms of to answer your question a little more pointedly, in terms of key markers, what we would consider key markers for a fair election system would certainly be the impartiality and independence of electoral management bodies such as ABEC. And I did point out when I started our conversation that one of the features in the legislation was the way the Commission was structured, and it's structured that way deliberately to allow for independence of the Commission. The second item would be one where the process of, we are able to process, to register and identify each and every voter and to commit them to a voters list. Obviously, without being on that list, you can't vote. And so it does remove a lot of the doubt which sometimes surround persons' eligibility to vote. And then there is universal adult suffrage, which is non-gender based. So once you're 18, male or female, you're eligible to vote. And that is perfectly consistent with what applies in most places of the world. Then the other thing would be the secrecy of the ballot. We ensure that we go to all lengths so that a person's how a voter votes is not disclosed to any third party. An important element as well is the transparency of the process. And that transparency is built based on the structures set out in the law as well, in terms of the presence of scrutineers who are there to observe the process for either party or independent candidates. Then we have observers, both international observers, local observers, regional observers. And so they are able to, well, at the end of the day, give a full report as to whether or not the poll was well conducted, whether or not it was fair, whether or not there were any aberrations, whether or not there were any issues that would raise concern or items which needed to be corrected for the next time. And then there is the mechanism for claims and objections, which is a process under Section 22 of the Act. That is also very important in terms of the ability to object to somebody who may not properly appear on the voter list in one constituency or another. And then finally, to close that off, is the law is particularly strong on penalties for infractions of the law, the electoral law. And that will cover things such as impersonation, bribery, treating, undue influence, or even disturbances at a polling station during the conduct of an election. And of course, as you know, these are summary offenses which can lead to imprisonment or severe fine. So I think taken on a whole, I would say, those items will go towards constructing a fair and proper electoral system.
Thank you for that. I think those are very critical points, and the way you put it all together, it sounds like a process, and I think that's important because it's really the process itself that has to be fair and transparent, right, as you would have mentioned. I want to also piggyback on something that you would have mentioned earlier, Mr. Hughes, which is training. You would have mentioned training your staff. So the election rules, which are subsidiary legislation, they're in the first schedule of the Representation of the People's Act, if you're following along online and you want to look for it. Rule 5 of those election rules speaks to training, and it requires the Commission to provide training to all officers, so the returning officers that you would have mentioned, presiding officers, poll clerks, etc. Can you tell us what type of training it is that these officers would receive before an election, and why is that so important, again, for the whole process and for public confidence?
Right, and education is key. And so one of the things that we would have done at the Commission level is to simplify that particular legislation. I am not a lawyer, but as both of you will admit that reading that particular legislation sometimes leads to varied understanding of the legislation. So what we have done is to simplify it and create a manual which allows for the returning officer within who is responsible for that particular constituency to be the one to train the electors regarding the procedures of election, so to speak. And so from the 3 weeks before the actual election, and so they would have started last week with their teams to refresh, because many of the election day workers would have worked before, and it's just a matter of refreshing the material. And so we're looking at what do you do on election day, the various scenarios regarding the blind voter, or someone who requires the assistance of the presiding officer, and what the law says. But we simplify it and we utilize case studies to ensure that we reinforce the various laws. And so it's, in terms of training, procedural, to ensure that the steps, the processes are followed. What happens at the start of poll? We now have a transparent ballot box. Prior to that, if my memory serves me correctly, we had wooden ballot boxes, and then we had metal ballot boxes. The last set of ballot boxes we had, they were sort of PVC type material, in any event, you could not see what was inside of the box. With this particular box, and we were on air a few weeks ago, and we said to the public that it's a clear, transparent box. But the fact of the matter remains that you can see what's being placed into the box. It takes that whole delusionary idea out of the process that you're stuffing ballot boxes. And so understanding how that process works, ensuring that the presiding officers understand their role regarding issuing of that particular ballot, and that they're not there to intimidate, as the chair spoke to earlier. You can be fined and confined, or both, and or if you do anything untowards to prevent an elector from exercising their franchise. So you do have a lot of responsibilities as presiding officers regarding the poll clerks. And I should say here also that all of the election day workers are trained overall as presiding officers. In the event that something happens to the presiding officer, one of the two clerks would be able to step up and then assume the responsibilities of the presiding officer. But suffice to say, they're also trained in terms of how they capture the data regarding recording of the names in the poll book, or if some incident were to have taken place during the process, to record that in the poll book. In terms of the gender stats, because that's something we do also. We started that, Dame Lorna would have started that in 2018. And so what that allows, we're able to then look at various groups, age groups, 18 to 23, then 24 to maybe 29, the number of females who actually go to vote, the number of males who actually go to vote. And we don't know how they vote though, but important for us is it gives us an idea as to which demographic is actually the most active in terms of going out to vote, and that's useful information also. So in terms of understanding all of those procedures at the close of poll, what happens at the close of poll, how are you supposed to ensure that your documents are written to ensure that you maintain, since we're speaking about integrity, transparency, and fairness, that all of that is maintained. And regarding the returning officer, at the end, at the count, understanding who the various processes in terms of counting the ballot, what is a rejected ballot, what constitutes a rejected ballot, and there are three ways in terms of how a ballot can be rejected, what constitutes knowing exactly whom the elector would have voted for, because there is a particular area within the law that says once the intent is clear regarding how that elector would have placed their mark, then of course it would be a good ballot. There are some who would say to you, if the mark touches the box, then it's a rejected ballot. But then, is that really fair? A slight touch does not mean that the ballot is rejected. So understanding those processes and looking at the various scenarios. And finally, the transmission of the results to ensure that all parties during the count, because they are present, are able to accept the results, whether close, whether it's a close election or not, and that the process would have been conducted in a fair manner, and of course, ensuring that that result gets to the commission in time, so that we can then, according to the writ, have it returned when it should be, which is usually the day after the election. So all of these processes, looking at them, fine-tuning them to ensure that whomever it is that's at the helm within that particular constituency, that they have all of the resources to ensure that they do an excellent job.
Thank you so much for what you've outlined. Well-trained officers avoid mistakes on election day. So
Exactly.
it's very important what you've outlined. It really highlights how much structure and how much preparation has gone into ensuring that the electoral process here in Antigua and Barbuda is fair and that it runs very smoothly. We're going to be taking a very quick break now, but when we return, we're going to be talking about voter registration and a little bit more about the polling day process. So stay with us. We'll be right back on Justice, where we talk about knowing your rights and knowing your power.
Justice.
The following is a list of the 17 registration units across Antigua and Barbuda. St. John's City West, Villa Primary School. St. John's City South, Central Registration Unit on Factory Road.
St. John's City East, Central Registration Unit.
St. John's Rural West, Multipurpose Cultural and Exhibition Center, Perry Bay. St. John's Rural South, Noel Naya Roberts Sports Complex. St. John's Rural East, Shires Building opposite the Lion's Den. St. John's Rural North, Yorks Community Center, Yorks. St. Mary's North, former Christian Faith Academy, Valley Road. St. Mary's South, Turner's Apartments, Bolands. All Saints East and St. Luke, Roman Catholic Church Hall, Roman Hill. All Saints West, former Community Access Center, All Saints. St. George, Potters Village opposite the Potters Primary School. St. Peter, Precision Center, Painters. St. Philip North, Glanville's Community Center. St. Philip South, St. Philip Post Office. St. Paul, former Real Local Art Gallery, Horsford Hill. Barbuda, Law School, Barbuda.
Welcome back to Justice. This is the show where we talk about knowing your rights and knowing your power. Before the break, we were talking about the role of the Electoral Commission and the importance of proper procedures and training in ensuring that elections are conducted fairly and transparently. Now, I want to bring this discussion a bit closer to you who are watching, the individual voters. Mr. Hughes, what should every eligible citizen know about voter registration, about the voters list, and about their voter cards right now?
Right now. Well, in order for me to go with right now, I just need to take you back a little bit, just a little bit.
No problem.
So
Take us
prior
back.
to electoral reform, registration would have been in the month of July for, I think it was a 1-week period. And so you needed to go at that particular point in time once you had met the criteria in order to register. That was the only window you had during the entire year. With electoral reform, what we have now is continuous registration, in that once you have met the criteria and the basic criteria, which I'll go into in a little bit, you are then expected to go and to apply to be registered as an elector in order for you to vote. So the criteria is 18 years of age, and if an Antiguan and Barbudan, and so some of the documents that you would need to bring with you as an Antiguan and Barbudan, first document is your passport, and valid, of course, passport, in order to satisfy the registration officer, well, to satisfy the requirements that you are eligible to vote. And in the absence of the passport, birth paper with some other form of government-issued ID, your driver's license, your social security, medical benefits card. In the absence of those three, then a passport size, certified passport size photo. We have had occasions where the name on the birth paper slightly differs to what's on those documents or even on the passport. So you would then have to go and get a baptismal certificate. And there are other documentation that may be required, an affidavit for change of name, other documents and other proof that need to be required, that may be required. And then, of course, for Commonwealth citizens, in that the law, as we speak now, you must be living in Antigua and Barbuda prior to you presenting to be registered for 7 legal years. Legal means that you have been up to date with your immigration status and any other documentation that you would require. If you do have an indefinite stamp in your passport, it needs to have been in there for a 7-year period. And so all of this for a Commonwealth citizen. Commonwealth citizens are those citizens or those countries that would have at some point been part of the British Empire. And so there are some faraway countries that electors, not electors, but our people would have heard of. So, for example, Pakistan. Pakistan at one point, they were part of the British Empire. And then many countries in Africa also. And India, for example, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. So once they meet that threshold of living here 7 years prior to when you are presenting yourself, then that would enable you to be qualified. There are some who have been here longer than that 7-year period, but they would have had breaks or gaps in between. So the law speaks to 7 years prior to you presenting or before you present. And then, of course, you have the other qualifier of residency in the constituency for 6 months. And so having met the criteria there, then the registration officer, which I spoke to earlier, will accept your data that's scanned into our system. Your fingerprints are captured, signature captured, a photo of you is captured, and all of that is validated with your fingerprints. Now, it's an application to be registered to be an elector. It's not a fait accompli. It's not immediate. It doesn't happen right away because there's a period of claims and objection which the elector still must go through. And according to law, that comes to an end 31 days after the last day of registration in the previous month. So we are in the month of April, which means that 31 days after the last day of registration in the month of April, which would be the 30th, because we have continuous registration, even though we have elections on the 30th, you can still go and register. It just means that you would not be able to vote in the election because your claims and objection period comes to an end 31 days after the 30th of April, which brings us to the 31st of May. So on the 1st of June, that period is complete, and then you would be considered, I don't know, for want of a better term, eligible. Yeah, yeah, eligible to be part of the register. Now, there are some who would continue to ask the question. It's a very valid question. If I have now completed the process, why am I not getting my card right away? And the law says you get your card when your name appear on a register. And so the registers that we produce throughout the course of the year, 2 are considered lists, which are the April list, preliminary list, the October preliminary list, but the June register and the December registers, those are the registers that once your name appears on those registers, that's when you will receive a card. So there are some who would say, oh, I have to wait 6 months. It is the process. We have to remember where we're coming from, where prior to electoral reform, it was only for that 1 week, and you had loads of allegations that lists were being padded and so on. So this is our process now, and I think we have an excellent process, a good process, and so we continue to treasure that particular process. Regarding the elections, as we are now, a number of the cards have expired. The last re-registration exercise we had was in 2013. A number of those cards were printed in 2014. So the cards are valid for 10 years, which means that the majority of the cards would have expired in 2024. And we started a replacement ID process back on the 12th of August 2024 for those electors whose cards are expired to come in and renew their card, to replace those cards, to validate those cards, and that's what we've been doing for the last 2 years. What we've found over the last 2 years, what really moves or ticks is the fact that there is an election. And so we had a by-election in St. Peter last year, and so that moved the needle. Prior to the by-election, we had maybe about 30%. But at the end of the process, we had 75%. That's when the electors were mobilized, so to speak, or that's when they really felt that they needed to go. There was an event happening. In Barbuda last year also, they had local government elections, and that also, we saw an uptick in the numbers, and so they're now at 73, 74%. And again, recently in the St. Philip North by-election, we also saw a great movement in terms of the electors going out to revalidate their cards. And now with the general elections, when we started 3 weeks ago, just when the writ was issued, we were at 19,500. Now we are at 29,000, and I believe that by the end of this evening, I haven't seen the data as yet, we should be at 30,000 by this evening. That with at least 15,500 cards that are active would bring our overall active total to roughly 45,000 of the 63,000 that are on the electoral roll as we speak, which would be around 70 to 75%. So that's where we are now. But go and replace your card. If it's expired, check it. Look at the base, bottom right corner. Look there, you'll see the expiry date right there. Go and replace your card if it is expired. You may not wish to vote in this election, that's fine, but go and replace it. It's a very valuable piece of document, and so you can use that as an ID at any of the business places that require that.
Thank you for that clarity. And so if you are eligible to vote, I want to turn to you, Ambassador Thomas, and to ask about the strong emphasis that the law places on voters. You would have touched on it, voting freely and voting privately.
Right.
So can you explain the measures that are currently in place for persons to protect that voter's privacy in the booth?
Well, Section 42 of the Act deals with privacy and secrecy. And so the legislation is very strong on that. And so as you would have voted before, the voting is done in a private space. And so we ensure that the polling area is established in such a way as to allow for absolute privacy. And then, of course, during the whole process of voting, your ballot, once you've cast your vote, is properly folded to allow to maintain as a carryover that privacy as you drop it into the box. And in addition to that, the only person who's allowed inside the voting area would be yourself, except where there are instances of incapacity. And this is particularly in relation to a blind person. Mm-hmm. And that's dealt with by Section 42(4) of the Act, which allows for that blind person to be assisted by a companion. Or there may be instances where someone asks for assistance, and then they'll be assisted by the polling clerks.
By the presiding officer?
By the presiding officer, sorry, by the presiding officer. Mm-hmm. In which case, the way in which that person has casted their vote must be maintained as a private matter, notwithstanding the presence of other people.
And that includes in the presence of the agents. Correct. Of the political party. Correct. Who are also sworn to secrecy.
Yes.
And so because they're there primarily to ensure that in that instance, that the presiding officer is doing the right thing in terms of ensuring that they're casting the mark or making the mark as the elector would have stipulated.
And as Mr. Hughes mentioned earlier, that we're big on the training.
Yeah.
And so the polling officials are trained to understand the importance of confidentiality and secrecy. They understand as well that it's an offense to disclose how a voter has voted. And they also understand that it is an offense to interfere with the way that people vote. or to try and influence them or to intimidate them. So the law provides a whole range of issues relating to privacy and confidentiality. And so we did mention earlier the whole issue of offenses which apply in relation to electoral matters, and specifically in relation to voting. There's another whole range of offenses which include intimidation or coercion, attempting to photograph a ballot. You may notice that at the polling stations when you go to vote, you're asked to deposit your phone. And there's a purpose of that, because phones these days all carry a camera.
Yeah.
They don't want anybody to be doing that. And also, it's an offense to pressure somebody to reveal the manner in which they have voted. So the law is really, really big on confidentiality and privacy, and it makes the voter feel secure that they can exercise their franchise in a manner which is free and which is fair, or free from fear, as we sometimes say.
I think that's very important, as you mentioned, maintaining that transparency of the process. Thank you both for walking us through that. It's very important for that free and fair election process. Now, Mr. Hughes, just before we go on another break, I'm coming back to you. From the moment that a voter arrives at the polling station, just can you walk us through that? What should they expect? For the viewers who are watching, maybe this is their first election that they're voting in. What are the steps? What are their rights throughout that process?
Right.
Ambassador would have touched on some, but what can they expect?
Right. So once you enter on the compound of the polling station, you will encounter information clerks, and they're there to guide you, to direct you as to where you should be going to exercise your franchise, to direct you to the polling stations. One of the things that they're going to ask you for or to see is your voter ID card, because you may have the wrong card. You may have the right, you will have the right one, and then you'll have others who may have the old card, the expired card. There are some who have not yet gone to replace their cards, and they may show up thinking that, oh, it's election day, I have my card, I'm going to go to vote, and they didn't check it. So those clerks, first thing you're going to meet is those clerks who are going to check to make sure that you have the right documentation. The polls open at 6 a.m. You will meet, if you are not there first, you will meet other electors there online. Usually in the mornings, it's a little bit slow in terms of, because you're just starting and you want to make sure that everything is working the way it should. And then once it gets going, by mid-morning, you should not see any lines, and then there will be a trickle until later in the evening. But after you would have lined up, you would go into the polling station with your proper ID, your valid ID card, and the Ian Hughes and All Saints, and the presiding officer will take that card, pass it on to the clerks, who would then record that Ian Hughes is presenting himself to vote, and they will do whatever they have been trained to do, including capturing of the gender stats. The presiding officer will then tear a ballot or remove a ballot from the stack that he or she has, and they will affix a seal to it. And they will then show it to you and issue some guidance to you, which is basically, this is the ballot, these are the candidates, you're expected to vote for only one. Try to ensure that you place your mark in the box. They will then fold that ballot. They will check your fingers to make sure that you have no ink on it. And just to ensure, for even more transparency, and they would then direct you to the polling booth. There's a pencil there. You make your mark, and they would have said to you, fold the ballot in the particular manner that I have shown you. So when you get back to me, you just need to show me only the seal. Once you get back to after making your mark, to the presiding officer, they're going to check your fingers again. And then you will then submerge or immerse your finger, your index finger, in the ink. Ballot is placed. They give you some paper towel, something to clear the excess ink. You make sure you get your card back, and then you collect your phones or whatever else, or your smart glasses. I understand we have smart glasses now from the box, and you then leave the polling station and you leave the compound. It's an offense to loiter on the compound, or at least within that 100-yard space that the law speaks to. And you then go back to work, if you are going back to work. And maybe we should mention here also that the law provides, I think it's section 37(1) of the law, that speaks to employers giving each employee 4 consecutive hours with pay to go and exercise their franchise. But of course, depending on the business that you are running or managing, you may have to organize or schedule how your employees will then go and exercise your franchise. Of course, you do not want your business to not be manned properly on that particular day. But it's important to note 4 consecutive hours. And that, in a nutshell, is how that particular process works.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes, for that walkthrough. So follow the instructions of the officials, maintain order and respect, and you have the right to vote in secrecy. You have the right to assistance if you need it. And of course, you have the right to raise any concerns that you might have with those polling officers. So at this point, we're actually going to be taking another quick break. And then we're going to be shifting gears for the last segment of Justice, and that is our rapid fire round. We'll be reacting to and responding to some of your comments on the Facebook live stream, any queries that you may have. So if you have a burning question or concern, now is the time to drop that question in our comments. Head over to the Facebook Lives and do so, because when we get back, we're going to be answering those in a rapid fire manner. So stay with us. We'll be right back on Justice. Know your rights and know your power.
Justice.
The public library is more than a place for books. It's a place for learning, discovery, and opportunity. For students, it supports study. For children, it builds imagination. For adults, it offers lifelong learning. The library helps build informed, educated, and empowered communities. So let's make use of this valuable space. Visit the library, encourage your children to read, support a culture of learning. Because when we use our public library, we invest in minds, in opportunity, and in the future of Antigua and Barbuda.
Welcome back to Justice. If you're just joining us, we're about to get into our rapid fire segment where we're going to be reacting to your comments and queries on the Facebook Live. If you have a burning question, quickly drop it in and we might be able to answer it. First, though, we're going to start with some scenarios just to warm up our guests. So scenario 1, I'm throwing this out to either of you. If someone is registered but they have lost their voter ID card, you may have answered this already, but can they still vote? What can they do?
Well, you need to have a valid ID card in order to go to vote. Now, if you have lost your valid card, then you need to go to the headquarters. Upstairs, we're located in the David Shaul building, upstairs of the passport office. And so you will go there and you would say to the staff that you would have lost your ID card, it's stolen. There's no charge to replace the card, so I think that's important that we put that in. Some other form of ID, and the staff then will assist you. The card is not printed right away, but they will give you a time, or they will tell you, listen, we will call you, and then you can come back to get that card. If it's a replacement card, if you need to replace your ID card and it is lost, that should not stop you from going to the registration unit with some other form of ID to have your card replaced. So lost card, valid to the head office upstairs, David Shaw Building, Queen Elizabeth Highway, former embassy. If it's replacement or an expired card, then you need to go to the registration unit and have that discussion with the registration officers that are there.
Thank you for that one. Second scenario, my elderly parent needs help to vote. Can I go into the booth with them? Now, you'd have already touched on this one, but...
Right, so of course, your elderly parent, that parent could also be blind. The law makes provision for those who are blind. The law also makes provision for an elderly parent who may need to bring a companion with them. And of course, they will... that vote will be marked because the law is clear. If it's a blind person, then you have a companion. But if it's just an elderly parent who requires help, the law does not make provision for that. What it says is that the presiding officer is the one who will make that mark in the presence of the agents. And so that's how we would treat with that one based on the law.
All right. Scenario 3. Can I vote if I am overseas on the date of election?
Well, you have to come home. You mean vote overseas? No, you'd have
From
to come
overseas.
here. No,
No,
you
not
have
at
to come
all.
here.
We're not there yet. We're not there
there
yet.
We're not there yet.
No,
All
we're not
right.
there.
And then the last one, can I take a photo of my ballot after I vote?
Oh, please, no.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
We did mention that earlier.
Yes, you
Yeah.
did.
Yes.
And you shouldn't even have your phone with you
That's
in
right.
that.
That's correct.
That's
We
right.
confiscate them for the time being.
Yeah.
All right. 'Cause
Or
that-
leave them in the car, lock them up. You don't need to bring your phone to go to vote. Plus, you'll only be in there for a minute anyway.
yeah, we don't want to undermine the
No.
secrecy of your
Yeah,
vote.
That's right.
So now we're going to move to some Facebook questions. Someone has asked, does the Antigua and Barbuda Electoral Commission have anything to do with the timeliness of elections?
The timeliness
I guess
of the
the
elections.
time that the election is called.
No, we don't. Now, in terms of when an election is called, that's within the prerogative of the Prime Minister. And we have absolutely no control. I think the only discussion that we may have is whether or not we are ready within a certain period to have the poll conducted. But outside of that, no.
Wonderful. And so the next question is, who determines that the intent is clear for the ballot if a mark is called into question? I think you would have touched on that, Mr.
The
Hughes.
returning officer.
Right.
And you have the agents or the tally agents for the for the candidate. They are also there. That ballot is shown to those who are conducting the tally, and they determine. The decision is final with the returning officer, but of course, he or she may get some buy-in from those who are there. They all agree that it is a good ballot or that it ought to be rejected, but at the end of the day, the decision is really that of the returning officer. So there is some consultation.
Very important to know. Another question is, what steps are being taken to counteract more advanced recording technologies? I think you would have mentioned like smart glasses or smart watches to maintain the privacy that was mentioned.
Right. And so what we have said is you take those off and you leave them at the desk with the presiding officer. Of course, with your glasses, though, that may be a bit of a challenge because we're mindful of the fact that there are some individuals who can see nothing, absolutely nothing, without having their glasses on. And so that is still in a gray area, gray space, so to speak, regarding glasses and whether or not they are smart glasses at that particular point.
All right. And then one final question. Someone has asked about voting by proxy and whether that's something that is set in place.
Right. So voting by proxy, though, the law speaks to who can vote by proxy, and that's really an officer who is working with the election or within the election on election day in a particular polling station that is far away from where they are registered to vote. So, for example, a police officer stationed in Barbuda and they're registered in Antigua, and they would not be able to get over to Antigua in time, they may, and they're working for the elections there, they may apply for a proxy for someone to vote for them here in Antigua. However, that that application must be in based on law. I think it's 3 to 5 days before the actual poll itself. That application is made to the returning officer. And of course, the necessary administrative processes are put in place to ensure that that vote is marked by whomever has been designated as the proxy of that individual. So yes, there are processes in place, but it's not for all and sundry. It's not for everybody. It's only for officers, and yes, police officers, soldiers, and election day workers. You must be working for the election in some constituency that is far away. So Antigua is small. I can leave, if my polling station is in Five Islands, I would more than have, within 4 hours, sufficient time to get to Freetown, the furthest point, to exercise my franchise, and have more than sufficient time to get back to my my location, or where I've been assigned in Five Islands. Barbuda, though, that's slightly different, but of course it may be a bit more expensive if you want to just take that flight and come across, charter that flight or that helicopter and come across, or get on that speedboat and come across. But the law does make provision for that.
Well, thank you for
but
that.
not for every and anybody.
Not for everyone. It's very
specific,
circumstances
limited.
that you've outlined, and limited.
Yeah.
Yes.
So to everyone watching at home, that actually brings us to the end of our program.
It's been an hour already.
It's been an hour already.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yes, yes.
So tonight, we have taken a closer look at the role of the Antigua and Barbuda Electoral Commission and the legal framework that governs elections under the Representation of the People Act. We've also discussed how the system is structured, the importance of voter registration and proper identification, the safeguards that are in place to protect the secrecy of the ballot, and of course the rules that ensure that elections are conducted fairly and lawfully, and we kept saying transparently because those are very important aspects of the electoral process. Now before we go, I'd like to give each of our guests the opportunity to share a few closing remarks at this time. I'll start with you, Mr. Hughes.
Right, so closing remarks, I would just like to say a big shout out to all of my colleagues who are, some are still at the office. We still have a lot of administrative responsibilities, duties, things to get done in preparation for the elections, of my registration officers and their team within the various registration units who are at the units from all day into the late hours of the night to ensure that the replacement card process is done. And of course, a special thank you to the returning officers who are already in place, and the fact that they are now conducting the training in preparation for the elections on the 30th with their election day workers. And so I want to take the opportunity to say a special thank you to them. Continue with the training, the hard work. A few more weeks to go. Sometimes it gets a little strenuous. It takes a toll on us. And so I just want to say, you know, we've got this, and we will continue to do this. This is our job. This is what we have been prepared for throughout the year, so to speak. Also to the electorate, that please go and review. Take a look at your ID card. Do not wait until the day of the election to show up, and you then say, but I thought, in my mind, I didn't think my card was renewed. There will be an opportunity for you to still go and exercise your franchise, but you would still have to go through the entire process. You must revalidate before you get that special ID card in order to go to vote. Let me say that again. You must revalidate in order for you to get that special ID card. And that special ID card, still, you must go through a particular process of obtaining that special ID card, where you would have to bring a passport-size photo, and then the law states or mandates how that particular card must look. It's for one-time use only, so it's not a permanent card. So check it now. Go now. We will endeavor to ensure that you get, if you go now, up until the 29th of April, that you will get that permanent card in order to go and exercise your franchise.
Thank you for those inspiring words to the staff that are working hard. And Ambassador, any closing remarks?
Yes, and I'd like to say to the supervisor of election that he has been working exceptionally hard as well. And so I'm glad he sounded that note in terms of encouraging the people back in the office. They're there till midnight sometimes to get this done. Because given the short period of time within which we needed to get everything put in place. But I just want to say to the public that an election is the expression of national will and a very serious undertaking. And it really essentially preserves a democracy which we have been working on for several decades. We have had no real circumstances which has threatened that the development of our democracy. And so I would urge that we keep it on that even keel as we move into the next one. So my admonition would be that we keep it safe, that we respect the rules relating to elections, that we respect the persons who are administering those elections. And then at the end of the process, we get a result. And whatever that result is, whether our party loses or wins, that we respect the decision, because that is essentially the proof that the people have expressed the desire and their will. And so going forward, I think that that's what we should work towards, and I trust that the process will be clean at the end, and we'll get a good rating from those people who are observing, whether it be local or international observers.
A sincere thank you to you both. Thank you, Ambassador Thomas, and thank you, Mr. Hughes, for joining us this evening, and of course for sharing your expertise with myself and with our viewers. To our viewers, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. You had many questions on the Facebook stream. If you enjoyed tonight's episode and you want more of justice, comment the next legal topic that you'd like to hear more about on the stream, or you can send an email of your questions and your suggestions to ABS. I'm attorney at law Janice St. Romain, and this has been Justice. Know your rights and know your power. Good night.
Know your rights, know your power. Smart talk, real facts. This is your hour. We make it clear, we keep the blame. For Jenny St. Romain, we break the law, down no game. Know your rights, know your power. Justice.